Hello, friends and fellow travelers. Welcome to the ReVIBal podcast. Inspiring, sometimes funny conversations with an awakened ex-religious leader and a sexy hippie mom of six talk about change, transitions, mindful living, and spirituality, featuring your hosts Amelia Page and Dr. Chuck Crisco. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and if you'd like to level up your listening experience, you can watch us have this conversation on YouTube. Just do a search for The ReVIBal, ReVIB, as in be yourself, AL. Thank you so much for listening.
Action. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 2. And last episode, we kind of explored my story. And today, we have the honor and privilege of having a very special guest. Yes, Amelia.
Woo! Yours truly. Woohoo!
And get to hear a little bit of your story, a little bit of your background, and the revived life through where you are now. And so we're all looking forward to hearing all about that. So tell me a little bit about your family, because you asked about mine. So tell me, give your listeners a little bit of background about your family.
Okay, great. So my husband Dalen and I, we were high school friends. And so we met when we were 15, 16.
Not sweethearts.
Not sweethearts, just friends. He liked me for like 5 solid years. And when I was about 17 and he was 16, I was giving him a ride home and in my car, and he told me he liked me. And I was like, oh, I just want to be your friend, and that whole awkward thing. And he bounced from that. Like, he honored that request and he didn't get weird or awkward. And so we stayed really good friends, and then we were in Bible school together down in Florida, and that's kind of when we got together. And by the time we got together, it was just like we got together and we got married within 5 months. So we have been married for 15 years, and about 13 months after we got married, we had our first baby, Olivia, and then we had a baby every odd year after that. So we've had 6 kids in 10 years. Their ages are 4 to 14 now. We have a girl, 3 boys, and 2 little girls. And we planted our roots initially in Tennessee, around the Nashville area. We moved out there when we had been married like 1 week. And I think that we were just fresh in Tennessee when you and Dalen met. He did some music for you, right? So that was great. And you guys were friends and were in touch a little bit over the years.
And I loved Dalen the first time I met him.
Yeah.
And you too, but I met Dalen first, so.
Yeah, quite a while first. I don't really remember meeting you or Trisha initially. Yeah. So anyways, I can't actually remember the first time we met you guys, but anyways, yeah, Dalen's a super great guy. I'm really, really fortunate to have him in my life as my traveling companion. So that's a little background on us. So we lived in Tennessee for 14 years and grew our family, grew our life, and that's where we met you guys. And last year, 2018, we uprooted everyone and moved back to our home state in Oregon, back to the mountains and the rivers and lakes that we love. We had like this dozen years of baby after baby after baby after baby. And then we kind of completed that season, and Dalen had started and was running a successful HVAC business. We had bought our dream house. We had 6 kids. I mean, we really checked every box that we had ever intended to check when we were starting out as newlyweds. But that kind of leaves you to a place where you're like, well, what now? And the things under the surface that didn't really seem to be working very well, or that, we were still not feeling like super fulfilled and happy, and just kind of caused us to question and rethink a lot of things. And so that's a little story in itself. But we ended up moving back home to Oregon, where we're both from, and connect back into our hippie roots. And it's so great. I love being back in Oregon. I gave up a lot in Tennessee, and I loved my life in Tennessee. I loved my house. I loved our community and our friends, and I knew that it was the right decision to leave, but I was so heartbroken. But once I headed west, like not even a nanosecond have I ever regretted that decision. It has just remained in my heart to be best decision ever to come back to Oregon. And I'm so happy to be here and be raising the kids here. We take them out to do all kinds of fun outdoorsy things, just like we were raised. And so it's been a blast.
Wow. So, I can't help but ask, uh, so 6 kids.
Right. Yeah.
And there's nothing, I mean, that's beautiful. It's great. My wife was, her family was 6 kids. And so she wanted, when we got married, she's like, we just want a couple.
Yeah.
And then I was, most of the years growing up, because some have a younger brother that's a little bit further age distance. I think I'm like 13 years older. But
Yeah.
my middle brother, it was mainly the two of us. And so I wanted a big family. I'm like, I want a bunch of kids. So for you, how did that, that framework, like who decides to have 6 kids? Was it just something y'all just decided on? It just happened. It was you were on an agenda. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna have 12 and tribes of Israel kind of thing.
I know. I know. Oh, it's a mixed bag. I think initially Dalen was really excited about starting a family. And I was like, oh, kids, yeah, sure. Okay, great. I'm agreeable. So we decided, like, why wait? And we just gave it a go, and it took right away. And we had our first baby, like, right after our first anniversary. And then the second was one of my best surprises. And he came like 16 months later. And so then I was getting the hang of this baby thing, like, whoa, it does not work for me to get pregnant. And I was in the South, and I was a part of a group of people that were really into big families and really into like having a bunch of kids and cultivating this, family unit is sort of the pinnacle of your life's work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on that road. I had 2 kids in 2 years. Like, I'm the poster child, right? So I was like, okay, I'll just have a bunch of kids. But there was a lot of things I struggled with. Like, I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety when I was pregnant. And so that was not an easy thing for me. And then just the sheer exhaustion of having, 2 kids in 2 years, 3 kids in 3 years, 4 kids in 5 years. I mean, we really, good. We really, excuse me, we really packed them in. And so some of the kids, like, I would just sort of feel my heart open up, and I'd be like, I can do another baby. That'd be fine. And I think after I had my fourth, I was really, really feeling at my limit and kind of like, this isn't going to be just a whatever kind of a thing. We're going to have to call it. We're going to have to get a magic number or some kind of end game plan here, because I just cannot pop babies out into the ether of my life, because I had, 15 more years of fertility left. And at that rate, I was going to beat out Mrs. Duggar for sure. So we just kind of ended up with 6. And in the end, after we had 5, we talked for several months, like, should we have one more? Should we just go ahead and have that even half dozen? We had sort of talked about it over the years, like, maybe we'll have 6 kids, which just seemed so erroneous, like, holy cow. But we had gotten so close. We were at 5, and so we planned our last one. And yeah,
when I was growing up, it was the 8. Oh, you won't remember these, I'm sure, but it was 8 is Enough was a TV show.
oh,
Another one, the Brady Bunch, which I think I think that was 6
it
kids.
was 6. It was a blended family. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Brady Bunch.
So you went for the Brady, you went for the Brady thing. You went for 6.
Yeah, it just really, I don't know. It just really happened that way. I think it was such a, like, such an intense experience for me that it wasn't like something I planned out um, with an idea. Like I was just kind of always from moment to moment, from baby to baby, really. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew for sure when we were talking about Haley that was it. Like I was like, I will do that one more time. And it's a sacrifice for me because I had to sit there, I have 5 kids. And I was thinking like, okay, so do you want to struggle with depression for a year? Do you want to feel like you lose touch with your life? Do you want to, it's like a drain on the family, the way that would always happen. And so I kind of counted that cost and thought, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll go one more time, just knowing that every day that I went through was a day I could put behind me forever and not have to do again. And so when she was born, that was the first thing I said was, I'm never doing that again. And then Dalen got a vasectomy 3 months later, and that was such a great decision. We are like good to go.
And they all lived happily ever after.
Yes. So she's 4 now, and I'm coming up for air for the first time in, 12, 13, 14 years, where I don't have a baby in diapers. I don't have high chairs and sippy cups and nap times and screaming toddlers. It is such a new world that I'm really enjoying it. And so at this point, I'm like so grateful that I kind of kept on with our vision, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it was like so clear that we were going to have 6 kids, but I'm just really grateful that it's all paying off, and I'm happy that we have this huge little tribe, and we're raising them now, and we're into different phases of life where it's not as exhausting physically for me or hormonally or emotionally exhausting for me. And when I kind of survey what we've got going on, I'm like, well, yeah, that was a great decision. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not so, yeah, like I want number 7, but
No.
we did a thing and
Yeah.
we did it good, and now it's time to move to the next thing. Yeah.
I had a friend when I had Haley, and Haley Kay, she's my last one, and she's this like super sweet pastor's wife. And I was at the library and I saw her there, and she's like, do you feel a little dead inside? And I was like, yes, I do. I was just like so over it, like this is my 6th baby, the 6th nursing, the 6th whatever. I was enjoying it because I knew that it was my last, but there was no more to do it ever again. Like, and and it's like moving to Oregon. I have never once regretted that decision. Like, I am full. My quiver is as full as it possibly can be. So
was there a time when you felt like the kids were getting at an age, like you talked about, where there was more time for you, that it enabled you to be able to think about different things about your own life? Did you go through your own kind of personal transition as a result of, okay, I've dealt with the kids at a certain age, and now I can kind of step back and think for myself for a day?
Right.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Did it help steer you in a new direction, or did it sort of send you in questioning life and all that other stuff?
Kind of like once I got back to me. Well, here's a good story. So when the baby was about 10 months old, I left to go fly back to Oregon for my grandparents. They had both passed away, and we were going to be putting them at the Veterans Memorial together. So they didn't pass away at the same time. Anyways, so I was making this trip across the country back to Oregon, and the baby was 10 months old, and I have usually nursed them past their first birthday, and kind of just commit that year to be around the baby. Like I wasn't big on pumping because I was too lazy. And so I left though. I was like, good luck with the baby. I hope you can figure it out. I mean, she was eating solids and drinking out of a straw and stuff right then, but I just was so maxed because she was about 10 months old, and I hadn't quite bounced back. Like emotionally, I was really buried, and I was disappointed about that because I felt like I just made this huge victory, and I knew I was done, and I knew that like life was moving forward for me from this phase, and I just really wanted to feel that tailwind, but I was so burnt out, and Dalen and I were we were struggling, you know, just kind of like most of our communications were like misfiring, and that was feeling really exhausting. And it was getting time to be like a new school year, and I was homeschooling, and I was completely out of gas for that project. It was just done, 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 done. So I flew away out to Oregon, and I had been in a pretty like kind of a dark night of the soul, but not really. It was more just like a real blank phase. Have you ever been in places like that spiritually where you just feel like blank? You're not really feeling bad, but you're not feeling great. You don't really have thoughts on anything. Nothing new is happening. You're not necessarily feeling abandoned, but you're not really feeling connected. You're just kind of like, whatever, you know? And that's how I was feeling. And so before I left on...
And looking back, that's, I think, probably one of the healthiest things we could go through to recover, because in that blank space, it's sort of like rest. I know I personally went through a time, kind of that dark night that we talked about before, where I just quit doing anything and everything that was associated with any of my old life, the kind of books I would read, the kind of things I put on Facebook. I mean, just everything, and sort of let everything's, for me, kind of let it die, and got to that just kind of, I'm going to be a human for a little while.
Yeah.
And then see what happens. But you were kind of in neutral because you probably had not recovered from just the weight of all those years of, not that it's bad, but the stress of all those years.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of soul searching during that time too, and I had kind of been in this process, and we were with you and Trisha at that time at your church, and I had been in this process where I was really letting go of a lot of the ideals that I had that didn't serve, and I was kind of trying to reframe my Christianity in this way that helped me to understand God as being good, because I was just a little pessimistic when I looked out at the world and wasn't feeling the God is good thing. Like I needed to understand it, you know, like cognitively, and I could not understand that. And I wasn't wanting to pick a spiritual fight and be like, well, then I'm agnostic, because I just was like, I'm gonna let that lie. Like, I have other things going on, and I don't feel like solving this. But it felt very, it did feel a little empty. Like I just kind of floated through those months when she was little. And so before I went on that trip to Oregon, though, I had come to you and I was like, hey, I'm going on this great trip. Like, any books you can recommend for me to read? And you had suggested The Shack, which was not like my top pick of things, because I had picked it up before, and there's a really traumatic story in the beginning of the book that kind of messed with me, and it's staged all in Oregon, and like it was just it's I don't know if people have read it. If you haven't read it, anyways, there's kind of a tragedy that involves a child, and that's how this book kicks off. And I was really upset the first time I picked it up, like 7 years before that, because I was like, you know what, you've ripped my heart out, and you could basically say anything to me theologically right now, and I'm going to bite your bait, because I'm heartbroken about this story you just told me. So I wasn't impressed with The Shack. But that was your book that you suggested that I read, and I was like, all right, great, whatever. I think I found it at Goodwill or something, and I took that book with me, and oh my goodness gracious, I just boohooed like on the airplane, and I had felt like that I did sort of have this clean slate, you know, with a pencil drawing of what was left of my faith system. And I felt like what resonated with me about that book was what he was saying that I already knew was true. So he wasn't telling me something new and being like, oh, it's this way or it's this way. It was like the story unfolded and spoke to me that I was like, I knew it. I knew that was what God was about. And I sensed that, like it like put color back into my spirit. And it was a huge turning point for me. And that was in 2016. And from there, I just began to really sort of like open up my heart to what else resonates with me. Yeah. You know, where else can I recognize that spirit within me that's out there? Like, what's the conversation happening? And so that was a great
And it
turning point for me in my faith and coming
isn't
back up for air.
isn't it interesting too? You know, you'd picked up the book a long time ago, and it wasn't. There is like a timing for things.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and I know it's kind of an old saying, but you know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Uh-huh.
You know, when we're in the place for the next step, it's like if we're ready and open for it, what would not have worked 5 years ago or 2 years ago or 15 minutes ago, all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden now it's ready, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I had done a lot of wrestling between my last two babies because I had I was in such a great spot, probably like just like a really healthy spot before I got pregnant with my fifth, and was feeling like super strong in my Christian faith and really like absorbing this idea about grace, and was just had really high hopes going into this pregnancy that I would be able to sort of stay above the depression. And I couldn't, and I didn't. Like, I felt the clouds coming in when I was like 6 or 7 weeks pregnant. And those are always really difficult times for me because I'm peaceful and I'm even keel and I don't normally struggle in that way. And so it's very suffocating to feel so trapped like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a fixer and a solver and a very spiritual person. So I was trying all the time to find the door out of that. And I couldn't. So after that baby,
And,
after, go ahead.
and a lot of times in a lot of places, maybe not for you, are leaders saying, and people in general saying, well, if you were really spiritual,
Right.
you wouldn't be depressed. Uh,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you know, and then you got depression and guilt on top of each other.
Hmm.
That's gonna help, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I remember feeling so frustrated and being like, if I freaking understood what the devil was all about, like, what is it? Do I bind it up, rebuke it, cast it out? Like, what's the formula here? I'm so upset. And I think a lot of the condemnation that I felt I heaped on myself because I was in such a solid place beforehand that I felt responsible for the like disconnect that I felt. And I just did not know how to see myself at all during that time. You know, I had
And
no idea how to see myself
and it was just
truly.
hormones. I mean,
Yeah, basically.
yeah. It's kind of sad, not how we can impose ideas over people who make their situation worse,
Right.
when in reality, it's just a very, you know, some of those things are a very natural part of the pregnancy process for your particular body or whatever. And um, but you're done now.
Right, yeah. And and I was surrounded by some really fabulous and amazing people,
Mhm.
and that I would reach out to for help and encouragement, but they were all in my boat, and so they were like, you can do it, except that, which, thank you, like they were absolutely offering me their very best, and I appreciate that, but nobody saw me, and I didn't even see me. And my mom would have, but I didn't live by her, to say, I think you might be at a limit. I think maybe you need a break, or you've had enough, or I think maybe that you're, and that's okay. It's okay to understand what you're going through and then decide accordingly instead of constantly just trying to try harder, try harder. I think that the way that I approached my faith left me striving a lot to just keep trying harder because I always internalize problems to be something wrong with me. So,
Mhm.
and
And
then that's very shameful. Yeah.
most of us do,
Yes.
or it's everybody else's fault.
Right. Or it's a blame thing. Yeah. Some people point
Yeah.
outwardly. I'm always like, oh, there's something wrong with me because I could see all these other women in my life who were doing okay with their journey and their motherhood and their pregnancies and their babies. And of course, a lot of us could sit at the park and like bitch about this and that and the other thing. But overall, everybody was going, and I just remember always feeling like this is really hard for me, and I feel very alone. So,
So
um,
the person now, the you now, if you could speak to the you then, what would you say to you? how would you counsel yourself? How would you encourage yourself? How would you frame things? Or if somebody was in the exact same position that's listening right now.
Oh, wow. I think that it would be, I would sit with her, I would sit with Amelia, and I would talk with her, and I would help her to tell herself the truth.
Mm.
Yeah, and help her to feel safe enough to say, I'm struggling, like this is hard, and maybe even articulate my needs. I needed to rest. I didn't need to be making bread or driving for raw milk and trying to like homeschool. I didn't need to be doing all of that. It was so unnecessary, but I added so much onto my life because I should, that killer word, the damnation word of should. And I would think I would just help her to connect back to herself and try to lead her in a different way that was more loving and compassionate towards where I was, rather than constantly just feeling like panic about the way that I wasn't thriving, and then just trying to cover it and fix it, cover it and fix it, cover it and fix it so it will go away. Like I didn't even know how to honor the fact that I was probably exhausted, that it's real, that my body is probably completely depleted, because I've had 5 kids in 7 years or whatever. I didn't know how to consider those things for myself. I just wanted to press through in faith.
Yeah. So I interrupted you, I know, earlier. So you were, and you may have already answered it, but you were saying how you kind of plateau and everything was sort of, in neutral. You handed the baby off to somebody, like take my child. I know you're safe. It's okay now. And so what came out of that?
Oh my goodness. Well, it sent me on a spiritual path. Like, what happened initially, I think, was that these teachers, kind of, what's the guys that wrote The Shack? What is his name again?
Paul Young.
Paul Young. Okay, so like Paul Young kind of came into my life at that time. Like there were these other teachers that kind of cropped up and were just totally speaking to me, and I began a personal journey like into my faith system where I'm a very, very, very spiritual person, and I've always been that way, just a seeker. I think we talked about in the last episode, some people want to explore the universe out there. I am also, like you, somebody who's compelled to explore the inner verse. And so that's really great. However, and also I have 6 kids, so my life is very real, right? Like the grind of my life is very tangible, and it's always really important to me to find something that actually works with my life, that like a perspective or a spiritual practice or something, or a mindset or a faith system that actually nurtures my real life, rather than something that constantly causes me to conflict or reject the kids or whatever. So for instance, if I felt the need to pray for 5 hours a day, that's not suitable for what my life is actually like. That doesn't work for me. So as much as spiritual as I could perceive that practice to be, that would have to go for the wayside for me. So I just began to really pursue an ideal or an ideology that worked, because I clung so hard for so many years through such difficult times, and I was frustrated over and over and over. And I had done a lot of wrestling, a lot of really intense wrestling before that kind of like flat plateaued season. And so I wasn't really clinging to much by that point. And so one of the first things that really came into my life was I had been like a hardcore exercise person through the babies, just trying to keep in shape and all of that. And that served me really well for that time. But I let that go as a New Year's resolution when everyone else is trying to exercise. I was like, I'm not exercising because
I resolved never to
I
exercise
will
again.
not exercise anymore. That was my actual New Year's resolution because I wanted the monkey off my back. I didn't
Yeah.
really enjoy it. I enjoyed it the 23 and a half hours that I wasn't doing it, but I was tired of being
You enjoyed the
like,
idea of it.
right, right. And it did give me a lot of stamina, and I had a very busy life. So for that season, it was great. But I let that go, and about 5 months later, I went to my first yoga class. I was visiting my aunt in Montana, and she took me to a yoga class, and like I hit the mat, and I was like immediately emotional feeling. And I was like, oh man, this is so odd. And I had a little experience with yoga when I was in my late teens, but um, that kind of sent me on this journey of I was already reframing so many things. And so for me to find this space where it was about like just being open and not thinking and clearing out all the busyness because I have such an analytical mind. And the way that I approached prayer as a Christian was way more conversational and way more gratitude based, but also kind of needy. And what I needed was quiet. I needed a practice that encouraged me to be quiet and to be still. And so I loved that moving meditation that yoga gave me. And it was such the right time because things got harder before they got better. And so I had this like coping strategy now, this place that I could go to. And I was learning so much about prayer or even healing and like all these ideas that I had in like a Christian framework, but I was learning about them through a different way, like yoga or other ideals. And I just kind of began to realize like everybody's talking about the same thing. And actually, sometimes the way that the Buddhists, for instance, frame a certain idea, actually, I get that better than the way that I was taught as a Christian. And so I kind of began to see like the universal truth idea, and it really called to me because I love love. I loved like the crumbling of walls and the non-separation that I was beginning to feel, where I didn't feel like I was obligated to a team or a faith system anymore, but that it was out there for everyone and everyone was walking in it and we're all connected. And maybe some people through their own pain or their own belief systems can't see their light, but they have one. And that was so illuminating to me that just
Yeah.
that was it, that it was just for everyone.
Was that a moment where you went, aha, or was that like for me, it was layer on layer. It's like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
was it like an instantaneous thing? Like, oh my gosh, I see it now. Or was it this sort of gradually merging of ideas kind of coming together?
It was well, it was gradual, but not really when I look back on it. I mean, I gave my heart to Jesus when I was 15. And so I was 19 years into a very devoted, like very devoted Christian. And we talked about this with you. There was nothing in me that was rejecting that, but it was like it was literally happening to me. And I said that over and over during this season of my life. I was like, I'm not even like doing anything. I'll literally be driving and like an idea will come into my head, like evangelism, and then like a revelation will come that sort of is like, yeah, think of it like this. And it was like, oh my gosh. And then once you see, you can't unsee,
Right.
it's just, you're just changed. And so it was fast in a way because it took about 2 or 3 months. And all of a sudden I was at this place where I was like, I'm not on this team anymore. Like, I love the Christians and I love most of the people in my life were Christians at that time. And I was not feeling like I was, there was no separation between me and them, but I just thought, for the sake of the team, I'm not really, wearing the uniform or singing the team song anymore. So I might just need to bow out because I'm not representing like at all what is fundamental to Christianity. I don't reject it, but I kind of see it differently now. And so Yeah,
So
in
was
that
that a
respect, it was pretty fast.
so was there any sense of like mourning the loss, or was it like this was pulling you along so fast, or so uh, there's such joy that's kind of leading you in this that it wasn't hard to let go?
Well, it was
Because
so fun.
you had so many years,
Right.
like me, we had lots of years in the system, so to speak. And so for me, the mourning was more about, I think, looking back, it was definitely more about loss of identity in that
Hmm.
because of my leadership, but it wasn't the loss of belief, because you just, like you said, when you start to see something, you can't unsee it. You know
Right.
it. So did you go through like a mourning time, or was it just like straight in, man, this is awesome, I'm in it?
Yeah. Um, yeah, no. Yes and no. It was exhilarating. It was like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I had been set free. It was such an exhilarating, beautiful chrysalis that I was going through, and it literally was happening to me. And I wasn't. It wasn't like I was learning anything. I was having experience after experience after
Mm,
experience. And so, as they say, words don't teach, experience does. That's what was happening. It was just my view and my life was being transformed. The morning was probably the darkness that I felt a couple years before that,
mhm.
where I was really feeling so crushed that this is not working, and I didn't want to let go. I didn't want to like shake my fists and be angry, but I was really tired of it, so
Yeah.
there was kind of like that really difficult struggle that I went through, and that real sadness to kind of like the calm before the just grand adventure that I ended up going on. So yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something about learning from nature. I know you guys moved to the mountains, and I see the pictures you guys put. I can't wait to come visit.
Yeah,
Beautiful, beautiful
come
area.
on.
Um, I love the beach. I don't just like the beach because, like was said earlier, I'm an explorer. So, I love the water, love that. But then I want to go in the water and see what's in there, and I want to
Uh-huh.
go in a boat. I mean, I want to know where everything is.
Hmm.
But there's something about being in nature that teaches us how natural spirituality is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it sounds like, when we were doing more religious duties and trying to, from the outside in, trying to get things into us and try to figure out the right way and the expectations and all, um, you know, trees don't do that. Trees just,
Yeah.
it's a seed, it grows, and out of its DNA, it becomes what it is.
Hmm.
And it sounds like, there was a point, could have been you let go of some belief, or it
Hmm.
could have been just exhaustion. But when the natural process of spirituality could take place, all of a sudden it just starts to happen.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons why I didn't really mourn the loss of identity in a sense that you did, because I was coming home to myself.
Yeah.
I wasn't raised Christian. I was raised really by my parents are incredible people. They're loving and they're wonderful and they're stable and they're non-religious. And that is what I knew, really. That was so great to come back to a mode of being that is not blocked off, or you have your bumpers so you don't stumble or fall. It was like a life of freedom and
Hmm.
choice. And so, you know, there was really difficult times in transitioning out of Christianity, because our entire marriage was built on Christianity, our entire parenting philosophy, and all of our social relationships were built on this common bond. And so there was definitely this kind of controlled burn that was happening. I know that Dalen and I uh, basically restarted and thankfully didn't get a divorce, but we went down to that bottom and then decided, no, we're going to stick together and then just rebuild together with a different kind of paradigm, because like a lot of our roles and our expectations were rooted in the truth that we were trying to uphold in our Christian faith. And same with the kids and the parenting. It was like, you think it's your basic obligation to make sure that you churn out little mini Christians, and then to go from that to a philosophy where it's like, oh, you get to be who you want to be, and I'm just here to sort of nurture your light and support you. And I actually loved that transformation, because that's how I was raised. So it was so comfy for me to step into that, without fear. And I know I've talked to a lot of women who know my story and are a little bit more like, what about the kids? Well, what about your kids? And I'm just thinking, like, that's really the easiest part. But it's because that was my growing up experience. My parents were very like, go into the world and be who you are and all of that great stuff. So I'm really thankful for that experience.
Yeah, and we tried to do, even when we were even as pastors and so forth, we tried to, I'm sure my kids will have stories of being totally messed up because, because, on the one hand, we tried to nurture the same way, let what's within them arise, kind of guide rather than control.
Right.
And yet had a framework that kind of caused them to bounce against what they could do and couldn't do.
Yeah.
But were you afraid? You weren't, but some people may say, well, I'm afraid that if I raise my kids that way, they're just going to be wild hellions. They're going to be, so how does, isn't that the fear? I mean, is that what the possibility of happening is that's there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, well, here's what I've learned. First of all, so I was homeschooling. So, I had structured my life to have complete control over my kids and what was input, into them. And so that fell off, thankfully. I talked a little bit more about that in your episode, I guess. But I let that go and put them in public school, and really connected to myself and my strength as a mom, as like a guide and support. I did not do a good job dictating their entire life like that. I'm just not even organized enough to do that, really, and I don't thrive. Like, I want them to have outside experiences and then come back and be like, oh, this great thing happened at school today, or somebody hurt my feelings, then I'm there to talk about that with them. And so that worked out really, really well. And sure, they can go off the rails, but I learned a little bit of parenting goes a long, long ways. Just the fact that we are there for them and we are listening to them and trying our best to hear them out really makes such a huge difference in the stability of their lives, I've noticed. As they're around a lot of different types of kids, and a lot of kids, especially at this time of life, middle school, are very unstable, very experimental, and all of that. And so far, my kids just kind of seem pretty rooted in who they are and what they think. And I think it's because we are there with them, bouncing ideas off. And I know I've had, like, my 10-year-old, for instance, come home after a little squabble on the playground with one of his friends. He came home so upset and crying. And I mean, I had to sit with him for a long time just to get him to sort of tell the story and air it out. And I thought, it's likely that other boy went home to an empty house. And what was he going to do with all that anger and frustration and embarrassment about the argument that he had with his friend? Where is he going to put all of that? And so really, a little bit goes a long ways, I think, in helping our kids thrive when when they're supported and they don't have to cope by themselves or stuff things in. So that was helpful. And then on the other hand, go ahead.
That is really like professional counselors. That's what professional counselors, they get paid to do for us what our parents didn't do. If we had the opportunity, and I say our parents generally speaking, but they give us a safe place to process our emotions, or to someone who'll ask us questions to help us think through it, so that we can resolve inner conflict and problems in a healthy way, and so we don't become the angry kid that wants to blow up the school, we're
Yeah.
giving our kids freedom to go blow up a school. No, you're actually nurturing your children with love and communication and
Hmm.
providing counseling for them before they
Right.
ever, they're 40 years old and they're seeing a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or listening to our podcast.
right. So, quick
Yeah.
question. Transition just for a minute. So, you talked about earlier. You used that hippie word,
Hmm.
and so to you? What does that mean? I mean,
Oh,
it
yeah.
may be a broad definition or maybe very narrow. But what's it mean to be a hippie
Yeah.
in Oregon? In 2019? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, about our tagline and our adjectives. So, I'm the sexy hippie mom of six, and I was musing because I'm the one that I picked mom of six, right?
Right.
You're the one that picked hippie, and Dalen's the one that picked sexy. So we all have this like sort of ideal about who Amelia is and how to represent her to the world. So you tell me, what does hippie mean? It was your word. You picked it.
I better
But
not go there.
okay, I'll tell you.
I'll let you.
Um, it's sort of funny, I say hippie very lightheartedly, and the truth is that I'm very honored to be the stock of two very hippie spirited people. I mean, my parents are like the most law-abiding, wonderful citizens in the world, but they were alive and well in that era and did a lot of really cool and great things just to pursue their own expression and self and love and all of those kinds of things. My dad was in Vietnam and has a really interesting experience revolving around that. So it's truly kind of like the mindset of peace and love that I come from, and has been really the sustaining thread through my entire life. Is peace and love. Like if ever there's been anything that I've always represented and always felt most connected to, it would be those kind of
Right.
like twin ideas. Yeah. And so uh yeah, I tend to be a little crunchy, less than I was back in the day. I think I really wanted that identity a while ago, and I did a lot of work to be all natural and make all my own things. And then from there, I kind of switched to be more minimal. It's like, well, I'm not going to make my own deodorant. I'm just not going to wear any, you know. And then
Good to know.
thankfully, yeah. So, in that kind of like modern hippie respect, I don't know if I'm, like one of them or not, but I definitely have a free spirit for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think everybody that knows you would define that free spirit idea without putting you into a category. But
Yeah.
it's kind of an affirmation that the way your parents raised you, even though you took a course that led you into particular kind of experience, religious experience, and so forth. Um, it was those core values of peace and love that gave you probably the courage to come out of that, as
Yeah.
well as begin to raise your kids with the same mindset, which perpetuates that same. In other words, your parents didn't have to have all the answers, but what they did give you was something that would help you to find the answers.
Right. And so back a little bit along those lines, and like, well, aren't you afraid that your kids are just gonna like go off the rail and stuff like that? Um, well, no, because I just don't, it's like I just don't even see it like that anymore,
Right.
where probably before it just would have been like so horrifying to me if anybody had sex before they were married, or if they experimented with drinking underage, or smoking pot or cigarettes, or like skipping class, or whatever derelict things that they could come up with, like, oh
Chewing
my
gum.
gosh, I'm a failure as a Christian parent. And I just, it's real life up in here. We're not really creating expectations and expecting them to adhere to them, but we're that was the biggest transition in my parenting from Christian to non-Christian, was that I felt like as a Christian, I was leading. I'm going this way and you're coming with me. But when I changed my mind about all of that, I could just see all 8 of us on the front lines together. We're all breaking this ground together. I've never raised a 14-year-old or a teenager before. I've never raised that specific 10-year-old. Like, we're all new to this. And so come what may, right? And that's scary because that leaves all the possibilities open. And from my teenage years, it was just everything was abstinence, abstinence. No, 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 no. You can't even watch like PG-13 movies, right? Because it was a holiness and all of that. And so, watching my kids like make choices to expose themselves to watch it or something, and I'm thinking, oh, that's like such a bad idea.
So you were talking about abstinence, and as a way, you grew up in this holiness thing and abstinence and don't, and now with your kids, you're approaching that completely different.
Yes, thank you. We'll finish up this thought. We got interrupted. So, I've just reframed the conversation rather than like do or don't drink. It's like, okay, well, when you're in a situation when there's alcohol present, here's some things that you really need to know, and making sure that I'm approaching the reality of being a teenager in 2019 with eyes wide open, and not just creating these expectations like, well, just don't do that, because that's not realistic, and I don't think that serves them. And they may dabble in things, they may try things, and it's not that I want that for them, but I'm no longer afraid of that because I feel like I have enough connection with them to have a conversation about it, and to help them like understand maybe if it doesn't serve them, or teach them how to handle and manage these exterior influences in their life, rather than just expecting them to abstain and be like perfect and not ever do anything. And so it makes me feel a lot better to know that they're going to be strong and aware when they graduate high school and leave my house, that they're going to understand things, not just be so sheltered that they're not prepared at all. So
yeah, and I think that fear is not the best teacher, because
right.
if we spend all of our time with our kids just telling them don't do this, then when they get in the situation, all they know is fear is what is the reason why I'm not supposed to do this, rather than being able to process those certain events and situations that they're in a way to go, they've thought about it before, they're present in those situations, and they can learn to process it before they make that decision based on wisdom or whatever,
Yeah,
and a law of some kind.
And feeling connected to themselves, like,
Yeah.
that's a conversation that I try to have with them. It's like, I want them to be able to ask themselves, am I the kind of person that needs to drink as a teenager in order to fit in, instead of just succumbing to the peer pressure because they have no root system in their own being. So,
Right.
Man, we will definitely be doing more episodes and talking more about parenting, because we both have quite a lot of experience. You have older kids that are out of the house, and I'm like saturated in the younger years and up through childhood. So more and more and more where that came from.
Well, tell me, where do things go from here? So in your life, and you've moved up there, you've kind of readjusted your thinking, you're seeing things in a different way. What's next?
Well, going through that whole spiritual process was such a cool experience. And then the move back to Oregon was kind of something that unfolded pretty quick for us. And so it's all packaged up as like a huge reinvention. And I'm so happy and excited to feel like I'm beginning to land on the other side of that, because it's not easy at all to make huge changes like that, and to speak your truth and to just put your most authentic foot forward into the world has been a process for me. And so I'm feeling super excited. I have a YouTube channel called With Love Amelia that I started just as a way to kind of like unload some of this content that I have from the things that I've learned and the things that I've been through. And I have that going on, which I'm really excited about. And then the podcast, even though this is really new, right? I think what our idea is like 3 or 4 weeks old. It is super exciting for me because this is my creative medium. Just being able to articulate and talk things out. It's really easy for me to be open and vulnerable, whereas the YouTube channel is kind of like this video monologue. And so I'm always kind of thinking like, how do I flow with YouTube best? So it's been a process of like personal growth starting the YouTube channel, but I just am so compelled to share and like reach out to the world and share my experience and hopefully bring some resonance with people who maybe have gone through or are in the same season of life. And I have been there, and I love the idea of being able to walk alongside people in their journeys and help them navigate or bring light or whatever I can do to love the world. I'm very excited. So thank you for 2019 for these digital platforms that we can meet on and share our love on. So I'm really excited about the future and what I have going on.
Cool. And your YouTube channel is awesome, by the way.
Oh, thanks. It's a baby channel.
It's called With Love Amelia, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I encourage people to go check that out. If people have interest in emailing us or other platforms, how would they get a hold of us, or how could they find us?
Oh, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at ReVIBal@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page called the ReVIBal and Instagram page called the ReVIBal, and it's ReVIBal. So please come, reach out, give us a high five, tell us what you're interested in hearing. I think we would love to talk about whatever the conversation is that the people are interested in.
Yeah, and if these stories and perspectives that we're sharing, if they resonate with you, we'd love the feedback as well. To, you know, if this or other videos or audios help you in any way, we'd love your feedback. So thank you for being a part, Amelia, and to our audience, we want to say thank you for listening in.
Yes, thank you. All right, see you next time.
Next time. Bye.
Bye.